So I remember within minutes, I was super deep into meditation. I remember Goddess Maat showing up in front of me. And she had this beautiful, gorgeous white gown on, and she had these huge white wings that were like attached to her arm. It was very interesting because she had arms, but then she had these huge wings. And the closer she got to me, the more I could start to feel vibration in my body, especially in my lips.
Hello, my loves. This is Johanna Burkhardt. I am a multidimensional channel, teacher, healer, and author. And I am obsessed with all things metaphysical, esoteric, galactic, and of course, the healing journey. And I'm here to share my stories, my wisdom, and my teachings about being human in the illusion that we call reality. Welcome to Cosmic Blonde.
Hello, my loves. I am going to be starting a series of epic metaphysical experiences that I have had throughout the years, whether that be in dream state or meditation. I may even throw in one or two from plant medicine. We'll see. But I have been called for a little while now to share some of these experiences with you guys on my podcast. I needed to get through some other guests that I had on the calendar and documenting my 40 days of rewiring my brain. So now that we're through that, and I am in a new location, I'm coming to you from San Diego, California. I felt what an awesome time. The energy is prime for this. As I record this, we are in the first eclipse of 2024 energy. It was literally last night at midnight that the eclipse was at its peak. This type of energy is prime for vivid dreams and very intense visualizations, activations, downloads, knowings, new levels of awakening. And so I thought maybe these experiences might be a little activating for some people. And this would be a very prime time, always divine timing to share these podcasts and these experiences. So the first one that I want to share is probably one of the coolest. God, it's hard to say that, but this one was so vivid, so visceral, as most of my metaphysical experiences are. But I remember this was like nothing I had ever experienced. And I haven't had this intense and this long of a metaphysical experience since. So that's going to tell you a lot. And we're going to start with this one because it's just one of my faves. So on this particular day, I had just gotten out of a therapy session. Back then I was doing therapy, which for me, the words I speak hold the answers that I seek. Honestly, that's for most people. And so having a therapist from time to time is a great way for me to have someone hold space for me who doesn't really know me. And I am just very free to just speak and let the pieces fall and figure things out, right? So I remember getting off of my call with my therapist and walking around my apartment. And I remember that day I had a lot of things to do. And I just kept feeling Goddess Maat around me. And, through years of spiritual development and practice, it's very easy for me to tell who's with me now when they come in. And I remember feeling her and sensing her, and I just kept getting the nudge to meditate, meditate. And, you have a lot of things to do. You're running a business, blah, blah, blah. I had already meditated that day, and I finally surrendered to it. And I had this huge sumo chair. It's like a big giant beanbag chair. And I remember just sitting down in it. And I always meditate in sensory deprivation. So I have noise canceling headphones on. I always have a blackout mask. And on this particular day, I didn't have meditation music or anything. I remember I went through a couple of years where I just did silent meditations. And so I'm going to be referring to my journal quite a bit throughout this because as soon as I got out of this meditation, I wrote down as much as I could, as fast as I could, because just like channeling, the information disappears quite quickly. And while I never forgot this experience or the lessons that the experience was meant to teach me and to help me heal, the details are what kind of go away. And so I've had to reflect back to my journal. And this is why I have a journal right by my bed. And when I wake up from dreams or meditations, I go and just put it right to the paper because, like I said, it doesn't stick around. So again, this day, I just felt Goddess Maat. So I sat down to meditate. And for those who've been following me for a while, you know that I'm a trance channel, also known as a physical medium. So I can go really, really deep into trance. And it allows me to have very, very visceral experiences. And I can tell you that this was and is a form of time travel, this experience that I had. And I have learned over the years, as I developed into a multidimensional channel and not just a channel for spirit, that that is one of my abilities is to be able to very easily move through dimension, through timelines, through realities, through lifetimes. And versions of myself. Like I can very easily move through this. And while some, a lot of people can, for me, this is just it's not even something I have to think about. It's something that I can just do very easily, like brushing my teeth. I don't even have to think about it. And so this was one of those experiences. So I remember within minutes, I was super deep into meditation. I remember Goddess Maat showing up in front of me. And she had this beautiful, gorgeous white gown on, and she had these huge white wings that were like attached to her arm. It was very interesting because she had arms, but then she had these huge wings. And the closer she got to me, the more I could start to feel vibration in my body, especially in my lips. And when our light body is being activated, we can feel these little tingling sensations in our body. It kind of feels like when your leg falls asleep, but you'll feel it like in your lips or in your face or in just weird places, that you're not putting necessarily weight on to make that part of your body fall asleep. And that's a sign that your light body is being activated or that your light body is coming online. She turned me around, and if you've ever seen like a tandem air jump, like out of a plane, my back was to her front. And I remember this energy coming around us and it wrapping me in almost like a cocoon to where I was attached to her, like sucked into her. Like I wasn't going anywhere. I was totally wrapped. And I remember this energy of her like springing up. So it was like she was going up and then we went down. And it is as if we went into a tube of light, but we were going into the earth. And so this tube, you could just see these streams of white light that had these diamond and rainbow specks in it that were swirling. And this tube, the tube itself was dark. It almost looked like the inner earth. It was cool. It was comfortable. It was magical. And I didn't feel afraid. And it didn't feel like we were flying, but we were like moving at light speed because we were just flying through this, but it just felt so natural. And I've been trying to rack my brain and think of like a movie or something to give you a visual metaphor for this type of experience, but I just can't think of one. And sometimes these things are just hard to articulate, but it was just like this tube of light that was going into the earth. And again, we went down and then we came up into the base of what at the time I just would have thought was a giant cave because the space was huge, but it was pretty dark, but it was hollowed, if that makes sense. And I remember she put me in this chair and I needed to reacclimate my energy. The frequency that we were in was quite intense. And I remember feeling a little disoriented and her setting me there. And as I'm kind of getting myself together and orienting, I remember hearing telos. And I even wrote in my journal, I heard telos, not sure about that, but I will look it up. And this was in 2021. I had never heard of telos. I came to look it up right after I journaled. I looked it up and it's at the base of Mount Shasta. It's Lemuria. It's what's left of Lemuria or the gateway to Lemuria, I should say. And I've heard of Lemuria And I know that Lemuria, like the gateway to the remnants of Lemuria, is at the base of Mount Shasta. It's like I know that Mount Shasta is almost like a hollow mountain at this point, and that there's in that frequency, that's the access gate, if you will, the portal to Lemuria. But I'd never heard it called Telos before. And so as I get myself together, I remember this screen, almost like a hologram is the best way to describe it, appearing in front of me and very quickly being shown these glyphs. And that's what they look like. They look like glyphs. But she said they were brandings. And they kept like streaming, I saw every single branding. And then I saw myself walking around with the brandings, with those very glyphs all over my body. And I remember seeing it on the screen through a rust colored tint, meaning like, if someone puts on rose colored glasses, right? You see everything in the rose color. When I'm viewing what we're going to call a past life, because we know, I'm going to say it for these purposes of understanding, but we know all lives are happening simultaneously. When I'm viewing a quote unquote past life, I see it's my signal or my dictionary that I'm looking at another lifetime. And so it was all through that rust color. And I saw myself walking around with these brandings all over my body, like tattoos, like head to toe. And I remember feeling this deep sense of shame and isolation as I'm watching myself. And I was told, remember, all this is happening telepathically, but I was told that I had made a choice. I was given two choices. I could die or I could be branded. And I had been persecuted for what I don't remember. It's not a detail that I recall, or maybe I wasn't even shown, but I remember being told that I was persecuted. And when given the choice in that persecution of death or spending the rest of my life walking around being branded so that I would walk a life of shame and suffering, and people would know who I was, right? They would look at me, and by my brandings, they would know what I was persecuted for, and I would be left alone and isolated, and nobody would help me, and all of those terrible things. I remember being told that and thinking, I don't know. I don't know if I made the right choice. I think death would have been the no-brainer here, right? Instead of choosing to walk in a life of shame and suffering with all these brandings all over my body. I literally chose a life of suffering over death. And I remember thinking to myself, the amount of courage that I must have had in that life to choose that is insane. But I resonated with the feelings of isolation, of shame, of feeling alone. And I knew in that moment that that's why I was seeing it, because this shame that I'm healing in this life is the shame I'm healing in that life and many other lives, right? Because again, the guides always show me like a spider web, our soul, our oversoul in the center, and all these webs of lives and timelines. And we're all trying to heal the same thing, just in a little bit different context with different characters, different scenes, different sets, whatever, right? Different activities, different relationships, but the same things are being healed. But I'll never forget that feeling of, I'm not sure I made the right choice there. But after I was shown that, she was talking about this place called the Hall of Mirrors. And in front of me appeared the beginning of the Hall of Mirrors. And when I say a Hall of Mirrors, I'm literally meaning like the very first thing I saw was a skinny hallway, and it's floor to ceiling mirrors. And she told me that you're going to walk through these pathways, all made of mirrors, and it's going to lead to these openings. And some of these openings are going to be bigger than others. Some are going to be smaller. But she said it can only reflect the whole truth. And she said that once I go in, and I start to see things. I have to see it all the way through, meaning I couldn't bail out of it if I got scared. I couldn't start and then turn around and walk back out. And I think this is what a lot of people fear in these experiences, especially like with plant medicine and things like that. Like you're going to get stuck in these experiences. I remember feeling that a little bit, but I remember this energetic telepathic connection that I had with her, that she was going to be with me the whole time, because that's what telepathy is. It's not a mind reading. It is you being on the same frequency as someone else. So you can access the same thought cloud, if you will. And so again, she just reminded me, like, once you begin, you have to see this all the way through. And so I remember I had like this big lump in my throat, and I knew that I had to do this. I knew that this was something I had never heard of before. I was very intrigued by it. I'm a very curious person. And so I just felt called to go. And I remember as I began to walk into this first hall, I stopped and looked at myself and hadn't realized that what I was wearing had changed. And I was in this white gown or robe because it had a hood and it had a gold rope that tied around my waist. And as I began to walk down the first hall, I remember feeling myself like as if I was getting skinnier. I was like shrinking inward and I was shrinking downward. So it was like I was getting skinnier and smaller until I had entered into this first room. It was a very large room. And I realized that I was a baby. And I saw myself in the mirror as a baby, but then the mirror changed. And I began to see almost like a movie playing, and it was my mom screaming at my dad because I was screaming hysterically as a child. I was this baby that was obviously in need of being held, need of something. I was helpless. Nobody could help me. I don't even think I could walk at the time. So I remember seeing myself sitting as a baby. I was a chunky baby too. It was so cute. And just watching her like lose her shit. And she was screaming, she won't stop crying. I can't think straight. Like, I can't get anything done. I can't dealing with this. Nothing is satisfying her. Nothing is going to be enough for her. And I just remember seeing this child and wanting to go pick her up and hold her and not understanding why I was seeing this. And then the scene changed and I saw myself writing about that very experience. And I remember asking, like, what is this showing me? Like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? And Goddess Maat telepathically connecting into me and saying, remember, you're seeing the whole truth, which means that there is a seed, a root, a stalk, branches, leaves, flowers. The truth has many ingredients, many parts, many layers. It's not just one thing. And what you're seeing is that your not enough wound goes back 42 years to when you were a baby. At the time, I was 42 when I had this experience. And it wasn't just that one thing, that seed, it came from the moment of my mom not being able to balance and neutralize her emotions, what she was being like what she was being given to reflect with. Instead of reflecting with it, not being able to balance it, neutralize it, and deal with it, she projected it onto me as if a seed from a flower. So it's like one of her flowers, a seed of shame came from that flower and landed into me and took root. Isn't that wild? But that seed is just a seed. When we're a child, the first 21 years, these seeds are implanted in us and they're watered throughout our childhood to take root. And so we will have other experiences that actually grow that seed, and make it something that's more rooted and a part of our being. But I remember seeing this, and I was told that this not enough wound also looks like burden, being too much, overwhelm, and being too much. That is something I've been told my whole life. And so I very much resonated with that. And I never ever wanted to be a burden on anybody. I always felt like a burden as a child. Like my siblings felt like a burden. And so I took that burden on from my parents. So it made sense why I was seeing this. But it was to allow me to see a different perspective, um, And all I knew is as I was watching this baby, I could feel the discomfort in my body. I felt like I wanted to jump out of my body. I felt like I wanted to escape. I knew that this baby just wanted to be held, that she just wanted to feel safe. And that wasn't being given to her, right? Her just wanting to be held and to just want to feel safe was too much. It was too much. And I get chills just thinking about that because that has been the story of my life um, for 44 years. And then I was guided out of that room and back into another hallway. And as I went into the next hallway, I felt myself growing, like I was growing taller and bigger until I went into this next room. I was just like this long, skinny giant, and I was hunched over in this tiny little box. Like, just imagine this really tall, skinny me in this little tiny room, like hunched over because I'm too big to be in this room. And I remember feeling trapped and suppressed and just sore and disjointed and stuck. And I remember asking, what is this telling me? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I heard 15. I was 15 years old, and I was being forced to be in a situation that I did not belong in, that I was trapped somewhere I didn't fit. I was being shown that I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere or with anyone, and how I would just conform to the place or people or environment that I was in. I remember feeling uncomfortable and like no matter what I did, I just could not get comfortable. I remember that no matter what I did or how I positioned myself, I just could not get comfortable. Um, I couldn't get out of the box that I was suppressed in. And I wasn't allowed to ask for help. I was made to believe that this was the only way. This is the stuff that I was shown or made to feel to understand why I had to have this experience again. It felt like I was imprisoned and I was putting myself in places that I didn't fit. And I was trying to make myself conform. And that's what I did. That's what I did to survive. And that was very true as a child, especially after the age of 10. If I didn't conform, if I didn't make myself fit, if I didn't conform to what they wanted or to the environment, I did feel like I was going to die or be abused or hurt, which might as well have equaled death. And so it was so much easier to just force myself to conform. It was a survival mechanism. And I remember how uncomfortable and lonely it felt. Um, it, I can't express the feeling of loneliness that comes with not being allowed to be yourself and not being allowed to be who you are, because that's not enough or it's not good enough. You know what I'm saying? And I stayed in this space until I accepted it. And once I started to accept this truth, that's when I was able to start to shrink down and able to move out of that room. And this time turning right and into a new hallway. And I remember I was given choices. So like the first time, I think after the first hall, I turned left into the first room. And so coming out of this one, I chose to turn right. And so I was literally choosing the things to heal, right? Because again, this was like a maze of mirrors. Um, and the closer I got to the next room, the more I felt like I was going inside of myself, which is a very interesting an experience all on its own. And it was literally as if I was crawling inside of myself to hide from myself. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. It was like a turtle or a crab crawling back into its shell. And as I got further and deeper into myself, I could see a 5-year-old version of me. And she was in a corner of a dark room, and her knees were like, her back was to the wall, her knees were to her chest, her head in her knees hiding. And I knew instantly this was the sexual abuse. This was when I think the year before I had had my first flashback of my sexual abuse as a child. just for context for a second, um, I had always felt as if I had been sexually abused, but I had no memory of it. And one day, one night, actually, I started having dreams, and then I started having flashbacks, and then I started having, every time I meditated, I would see. And it's as if I was so mind fucked and in such disbelief that this was even happening, that it was in fact true that I was abused. And then to see the person who was doing it, I trusted this person with everything in my life. Um, and I would, every time this would happen, that was my way. I would crawl inside of myself and I would go into this deep, dark place inside of myself where I felt safe and I was isolated. And while physically my body was not in a deep, dark space hiding, I was internally. It was my way of checking out and disassociating while the abuse was taking place. Um, I was completely violated. My trust was broken. Um, like just this isn't even boundaries crossed. This is just complete violation. And to feel that again, because when you disassociate, this is why you have to feel it to heal it, because when you disassociate during trauma, you're not feeling it. And so when it comes back up, we literally just have to allow ourselves to feel it and hold space for ourselves as we feel it, right? Because that feeling is just energy that is trapped in the body that's trying to go home to the heart space. But it made sense because when I went through my awakening and after my dad died, I had to relive all of this trauma, all of this shame, all these emotions that kind of were uncorked with his death. And they started coming back up. And I could see now why I repressed my shame and why I repressed this pain and trauma so deep inside of me. Um, it was like I had made a prison of my own suffering, and I just chose to conform, to be safe, to survive each day, to be someone else. Um, the day that they were set free, they felt like they were about to die. It felt so unsafe. Freedom was the real fear, is what I wrote. And what that means is I was afraid to be free. I was afraid to have these feelings free. That felt scarier. I was so used to a life of abuse, and just repression of my shame and holding that inside of me. It just felt like the safest thing to do. And so setting that free was like, as someone who had been in prison their whole life and then being put out into the real world and not knowing what the fuck to do. Like those things are real fears. So I'm going to read what I wrote here. It was unknown and exposed. We don't know we can get out of the box we no longer fit or belong in without being punished. We don't know that we can be our own protector, parent, or savior, and that we won't be killed or abused for doing so. All we have ever known is conformity. When I started this episode, I had no idea. I didn't remember all the details of how deeply healing this was. And so it's bringing up some emotion here because so many people conform through people pleasing, right? We conform to our environment. We adjust. We're chameleons to keep ourselves safe. Our nervous system. And so reading this back is just bringing up some sadness because I just want to hold that version of me because I think of how far I've come and how much I don't conform. How much I don't conform anymore. And how rebellious I am. And the risks I take and the life of uncertainty that I lead, and just literally walking and beating to my own drum constantly, even if it's, not quote unquote correct for me, I just keep going and have been my own savior and my own hero and have been able to say no. And I'm so proud of myself because I wrote, so being free feels like we're naked and exposed, and that's the true danger zone. And today I love being naked. I mean, that might be too much information, but I don't care. I love being naked. I love being exposed. I'm very transparent. You guys know, you've listened to my podcast. And over the years of sharing my life, it's become my healing space, right? Shame is healed when stories are revealed in safe places. And I just, you never remember, or like when you start healing stuff, you start to remember, look back, or have to tell a story. It's like, God damn, it's an honor that I'm still standing some days, I think to myself. I should get an award just for being where I am, nothing else. So as I accepted this truth and these feelings, I was guided out of the Hall of Mirrors and I surrendered into Goddess Maat's arms. And she led me to a purification pool where I was asked to get into the pool and allow myself to sink to the bottom and allow all of the density to be crystallized, all of those heavy emotions that I had felt and experienced and faced, right? I saw it, I heard it, I felt it. I loved myself through it. That's literally my purification process. And so this pool represented the crystallization of that. And so I remember getting into the pool and sinking to the bottom. And I was there for a little bit of time. And I began to, as the density crystallized, I began to float up to the top. And when I got out, I was given a prayer, or a prayer was wrapped around me essentially, or told to me. And I knew at that moment my DNA had been evolved, right? That I had gone through an integration process and evolution. I remember just how clean and clear and freer and lighter I felt. And I once again was turned where my back was to the front of Goddess Maat, and I was once again cocooned with this energy that wrapped around me. And just like before, she sprung up and we went right back down in through this earth and through this tube back up to the space that I was in, to kind of complete the whole experience. But I was so grateful for Goddess Maat and for this experience, because through this work, I realized that I equated pain to love. That as a child, all I've ever known was that love equaled pain. And so I kept pain very close to me. And I kept choosing partners that caused me pain, and friends that caused me pain, and experiences that caused me pain, because that's the only thing that equaled love for me. It's the only thing I knew. It's the only thing I knew what love was pain. And I also knew, just through working with Goddess Maat in general, because she works with the energy of detachment, that I was attached and that I was holding on to this pain, that I was keeping it super close to me, and that I didn't have to do that anymore, that I could let go. I could literally let go of the pain, that I could now remove the emotions from the circumstances, from the situation, right? It could now just be something that happened to me, and I no longer had to hold the emotion or be attached to the story anymore, or the meaning, right? Because when you haven't had a lot of loving experiences as a child, and you think that love equals pain, instead of holding on to loving memories, you're holding on to the painful ones. And this was her way of helping me to let go and to heal those inner children. And so I know that's a crazy metaphysical experience, but it changed my life forever. I mean, 2021 was the year that everything began to change for me, the end of 21. This was in, let me look at the date when this experience was. It was in September 28th of 21. And so my book launched November 11/11. So my book launched a little like a month and a half after that. And then December is when everything began to fall apart for me. And then 2022 obviously began the nomad journey. So it was like, it, now that I look back on it, it was like the beginning of the end. Because I was setting myself free out of this prison, right? And it would only be a couple months later that I would literally leave and no longer have a home, no longer have any attachments. God, I'm just realizing this now. I literally sold everything I owned and put the rest in storage, and eventually I sold all of that. But I would literally release all of my attachments a few months later and just be me and my car on the road, free. I think this is why I had to record this one today, because I didn't realize that until now. Oh, these experiences that we have metaphysically, whether they be in meditation or in dream state, are very powerful. And I want to share these too, because I want you guys to take them seriously. Sometimes in dream state, astrally, we are just healing things, right? And we're just in the astral planes creating stories to heal something and playing something out so that we don't have to do it in the game in physicality. And other times it's very vivid and very real. And it has messages, it has meaning, it has healing. And it's real. As crazy as that experience sounds, I know it was real. I know I was taken to Telos. I know I was taken through the Hall of Mirrors. And that was the first time I had ever heard of the Hall of Mirrors. I remember I've talked to a couple people since who have had experiences with the Hall of Mirrors. And I was actually guided and with Goddess Maat with a couple of clients to take them through the Hall of Mirrors. But it's not for everybody, because again, once you begin, you have to see it through. And so the person has to be ready to face the trauma that they're about to see. And so it's only been 2 clients that I've ever been guided to do that with. And it's literally something that will come out of nowhere, because this isn't something that I would just do, right? It's something that has to be divinely guided. And so I would love to know if you've ever had an experience with the Hall of Mirrors or Telos in general. But this was a very powerful metaphysical experience for me. And the energy of Goddess Maat is very powerful. And so if you are holding on to suffering, if you are holding on to, if you're attached to a situation, if you are attached to pain or trauma, you may want to set the intention to call in Goddess Maat in your meditation, or before you fall asleep at night as you're drifting off to sleep. Set the intention to connect or meet with Goddess Maat and see what feeling or experience you receive. But thank you for holding space for me today as you guys listen. I did not expect to get emotional. Like I said, I was referencing my journal because I did not remember the details. I just remember the experience and what healing came from it. And so letting you guys literally witness my reaction as I connect with the information again, this was very raw and very vulnerable and unexpected. But nonetheless, an epically cool experience. And I will see you guys in the next episode.
Hey, thanks for listening. This episode was brought to you by JohannaBurkhardt.com. where it's time to defy the limits of your mind and step into your multidimensional mastery. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. See you next time.